All right. Hello. Thank you so much for your patience. So exciting. I just got off of your radio show, which I definitely will plug in this podcast below. So we have Mia St. John. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
Thank you for having me. It was so great having you on my show.
Oh, it was so much fun. That was really, really great.
I actually skipped all the commercial breaks because it was so good. And I get so scared doing that.
Yeah.
Like sponsors are listening. And
right. I know you should have told me because I just talk.
No, but if it's really good, like if it's not so good, I'll cut you off. But if it's really good, then I don't want to miss it. And I just keep it going.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's good. That's a good rule of thumb. So let me just introduce you for anybody who doesn't know. So you are first a boxer, 5-time national champion.
5-time world.
5-time world champion. This is a superwoman. Boxing in the ring. You're also, your husband was Kristoff St. John, who so many people lovingly know as Neil from Young and the Restless. And you've also been very public about your work with the Los Angeles Department of Mental Health, from your dealings with them and your son. And your son, tell me your son's name once more. Julian. Why don't you just tell us a little about yourself just to start off? I mean, I tried to give you a brief introduction.
Yeah. So, like you said, I'm a 5-time world boxing champion. I started fighting when I was, a little kid. I was like 6 years old, and my dad put me in Taekwondo. And anyway, I just fell in love with the sport of fighting. And
my friend just put his daughter in boxing. She's about 8.
Oh, wow.
Yes, he's a jiu-jitsu black belt now, and he's very excited about his little girl knowing how to defend herself.
I think it's so funny how fathers will do that.
Yeah.
I mean, my dad was like a drill sergeant, so it didn't, I'll tell you, I hated the sport at first because he was like one of those parents that you have to win, you have to train every day in 120-degree weather. Like, he was just one of those, like, evil coaches.
Yeah.
So I actually didn't fall in love with it until later in life.
Oh, you know what? Your audio is dropping out. Now, maybe that you know what? No, my audio is dropping out. I apologize. Zoom is an interesting thing. You said your father was sort of that drill sergeant, like, you must win.
Oh, yeah. He was like one of those parents that are like obsessive about the sport and their children have to win, and it didn't make it any fun. And until he was no longer my coach, that was when I really fell in love with it.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
And then
my whole life.
And then where are you from?
So I was born in San Francisco, but I've lived all over the U.S. And I mean, I guess you could call Southern California is my home. I mean, LA is my home. It's been my home most of my life. So
one thing I've always been so just amazed and impressed with you is just your fight and how vocal you've been, nonstop about your work with trying to reform the way Los Angeles deals with, the people who are suffering with mental illness or brain conditions, as we were talking about.
Yeah.
What is NAMI? What did you tell me that NAMI is referring to?
The National Alliance in Mental Illness, they stopped calling it mental illness and they started referring to it as brain illnesses.
Brain illnesses. Mm-hmm.
Just so people know that, because obviously people know that the brain is an organ, it's a physical thing. Mm-hmm. And so they thought it's a better way of referring to mental illness as brain illness.
Right.
So people know, no, it's not just in our head. Like, it really exists.
It's not an imaginary.
Right.
You can go online and see the brain scans of somebody, who is early on into schizophrenia and, more post-mortem, and you actually see brain shrinkage. And so it is a physical disease. And I think we discussed how how to get people to understand it like a diabetes or like a heart disease or like any other chronic condition that you have to manage.
And it really should be priority, because if you think about it, like if your brain is not working or working properly, then what is, right? I mean, isn't that the most important organ in our body?
Right.
Shouldn't that be priority?
Right. Shouldn't be a priority even in terms of research. I mean, a friend of mine referred me to some articles that I haven't got a chance to read that talked about different studies and how to restore some neuroplasticity in like schizophrenic patients. So I'm really excited to read about that, because I think one thing that makes mental illness such a stigma is feeling like there's nothing that you can do. You know what I mean? Sort of feeling like it's
hopeless.
You're right. Just a label that's that's got nowhere positive to go. And one thing that I think is great, I don't know if you've seen this on social media, but I see students especially, I love Z. I love Generation Z. Generation Z may just save the world.
Really?
They're like,
what Generation Z?
I think they're early 20s and lower.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they're like below millennials, which I think are now like, 25 or 6 or something.
I think, my daughter's a millennial. She's 28. So.
Yeah, so they're like under there.
They're the know-it-alls.
Yeah, oh, yeah, they know everything. You cannot tell a Generation Z or anything. But what I do love about them is they are extremely honest and very open. Like they have no shame about almost anything. And I see like they have now these groups on campuses that are called like, I don't even remember the name of it, but like schizophrenic or they have the name of the schizophrenia or something in the title of their organization on the college campuses. And they're like, no, we don't have stigma. We're not going to deal with that. Like, this is who we are. They're very vocal. There's a whole group of people online who, one girl out of New York, Schizophrenic New York, she's like has her t-shirts that talk about, just really taking this ownership, which I think it's such a key to destigmatizing and even medication compliance, like really accepting, what it is without feeling like you must feel ashamed or something. They have podcasts. They're really amazing.
Wow. I didn't know that. I have to listen to that.
No, they're like, I was like, these kids are like, really lifting the veil. And I just love it. I love it. And I know, so maybe you can tell us a little bit just about your son. He had paranoid schizophrenia. Now, how early did that get diagnosed for you guys?
Well, as you know, you can't get a diagnosis until they're 18 years of age or close to that. And my son got diagnosed at 17. But of course, as a mother, like I could see signs early on.
Mm-hmm. How early?
As early as probably almost 2 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even before that. So, it's just something a mother knows, and probably only a mother can tell. I could even feel it at birth, like something was just wasn't right. Or I don't want to say wasn't right, but just something was different. I could tell. And so, but of course, at that young age, nobody knows what it is. Doctors, you might think, well, it's a terrible twos or it's adolescence, puberty, whatever.
And meaning like emotional?
Yeah.
Like just sort of, okay.
Yeah. So you really can't diagnose it yet. But I kind of knew that he was hearing voices at a younger age. But he just, was ashamed of it.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever ask him? They say if you ask people, they'll oftentimes just say, because it's so normal to them, they'll admit, like, sure.
But you know what? It's interesting because my son always said, no, I'm not hearing voices. And I get it because to them, they have lack of insight to the illness. So they think if they're hearing voices, like they're real. So if you asked me.
Not voices.
Right. So if my daughter came in the room right now and said, Mom, are you hearing voices? I would say, no, I'm really talking to someone.
Right. Oh, interesting.
Right. So,
yeah, no, it is.
So of course, when you ask someone with schizophrenia, are you hearing voices? The answer is no, because they're real. Just like you are real to me.
Right.
So it's very hard for them to distinguish between a real voice and something that is not. And a lot of times it is real to them. So a lot of times my son, the answer was always, no, I'm not hearing voices. It wasn't until later in life he questioned whether these were real or not.
It's so interesting too. You hear so many people, who actually, have heard voices. And another reason they don't like medication is because the voices have been like comforting. So when they go away, they feel sort of alone, which is such an interesting phenomenon too.
My son spent a lot of time alone in his room and often talking to the voices. So I can imagine that when they're gone, he might not have had anyone to talk to. Yeah.
And it's interesting how differently this thing presents in different people and kids, because, I know for me, like I never noticed anything. I never noticed anything until 20s. I mean, looking back, I could say like, was that something? But like, really not noticed a lot until the onset, other than, I don't know, something that I can't even really, say, oh, maybe this. So it's just an interesting thing that everyone is different, and every situation is so different. And maybe that's why it's hard to really educate people concretely, because every situation varies so wildly.
Right. It's true. Like not anybody can say, like, my anxiety or my panic disorder might be different than someone else's.
Right.
That's why I like to hear, like, I like to hear other people's stories, because I like to know, like, if anyone out there can connect with me or can feel what I'm feeling.
Yeah. And that's really, I think, what I hope to add is just voices, speaking of voice, but like stories, like so that people can know, one, they're not alone. And which I think is really important. It's not only you. I think when you're wherever you are, if you're in the midst of of a mental health situation in any way, whether it's a loved one, whether it's yourself, it is this very isolating feeling. And we say, like, people don't understand unless they understand. So even when you try to talk to someone else, they're not.
Yeah, it's hard. You definitely can feel very lonesome, and it's very difficult to get people to understand. Like when I try to tell them like how I'm feeling, they're like, like if I say I'm, scared, I'm petrified. Well, of what? You have nothing to be afraid of. It's like they don't understand.
So dismissive.
You don't even know what you're afraid of. You're just feeling afraid.
Right.
So
I know. And, and I think, you made an amazing film about your son, which I just was so touched by. So wonderful. I'm going to put a link below to that.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and I sort of made a film in December from this caregiver point of view. And maybe it's just like we have to show these stories in ways that can make people understand, whether short films, short series, because I think what you're saying is right. You don't know what you don't know. You know what I mean? And so maybe presenting it to them visually somehow, or dramatically, as opposed to just a doc or something, that can help people really cross the bridge from like sympathy to empathy.
Yeah. I was thinking like, what if they showed, it's just an idea that I had, let's just say hypothetically, like the rants from Kanye West and the rants from a homeless person on Skid Row. Right. And you could see, while they're two in very different socioeconomic status, right? There's a lot of similarities.
Right.
So if we can show that, the similarities, then we could have probably more empathy for the homeless person on Skid Row.
And it's interesting because, okay, so Maya and I were talking about Kanye on her show earlier, and just how we see it as people who've dealt with people with severe, persistent mental health issues in our own family. So I think we see things in this different way. And interestingly enough, both people are judged. Like, so the homeless person is judged poorly, and Kanye West is judged poorly because the illness isn't understood no matter what the socioeconomic status is.
Yeah, exactly. It's so frustrating that's just something, like I always say, education is going to be key. Unless we can educate the public. I had suggested putting mental health 101, like they have it in New Jersey.
Oh, really?
They have it in all the schools nationwide.
I saw this meme recently. This is very, this is my first time thinking this through, so I don't know how to. But I saw this meme recently, and this mom was talking about how this little girl wanted to play with her son. And the grandmother said something like, be gentle. And the woman's son, who the girl wanted to play with, was mute autistic. And apparently, Sesame Street has a mute autistic puppet. I'm like, what song is that? And so this little girl had learned about this kid from watching Sesame Street, and as opposed to feeling like wanting to ostracize him, was like, oh, I recognize this and understand it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, that may be the case. Like maybe it is starting that education really early, that maybe that is the key to getting rid of that stigma.
I think so because I know that my son's younger sister just did not understand it, and when you don't understand something, you tend to get either angry over it or you make fun of that person, and it's just lack of understanding. It's ignorance.
And also not knowing how to handle it. Because, yes, I found that you can also, one thing I saw also was pretending everything was fine. So, I would be like, well, have you talked to my loved one? He's like, oh, yeah, yes, everything's fine. Yep, they're great. I'm like, that's impossible. I was like, that is La La Land, impossible.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that happens a lot in families. I mean, and even in ours, like it happens all the time, but things were not fine.
Right. Or, I saw on Instagram, I think, or Twitter, Damon Dash went to see Kanye in...
Oh, that's right.
Did you see that?
Yes.
Did you see that?
Yes.
Oh my God. And he tweets a picture out of, Kanye in his big sweatshirt with everybody's in a t-shirt in front of a teepee and says, we good. And I was like, oh, really? Dr. Dash? like basis. And it is something that happens so often, Oh, let me just talk to him. I'll talk to him.
Oh, I know. Let me go see it.
Oh my God. I know. I have a point. I actually thought I might cut that piece from my film because there's a piece where it's like, the mom's talking to the grandmother and she's like, let me talk to her. Like, I'm going to straighten them out. It's like, that is not how this works.
Yeah. I heard that so many times.
Oh, it's so triggering to me. When I didn't even realize it was so triggering to me until I saw it. And I was like, we good? What?
Yeah.
I was so
and
furious.
It might be good for that moment.
Yeah. And I was like, you have no idea.
Try living with that person.
And you have no idea.
Tell Damon Dash to go home and live with Kanye for a year and then come back and say it's all good. Yeah.
It's outrageous. And it is such a barrier to treatment. I know that certainly happened in my situation. Just family members, surely well-meaning, but not understanding and making things much worse.
Right.
Well, you guys, everybody should just try to get along. You're like,
yeah.
what are you talking
like
about?
It's so simple.
Like, you have no
Yeah,
idea
they
what
try
you're
to
talking about.
simplify it, and it doesn't work that way.
And I think even so it's a thing. It's like even if you don't know how to help, I think maybe we have to educate like how not to hinder, like how not to make things worse.
Right.
Because these people who have mood or thought disorders, so bipolar would be a mood disorder.
Right.
Schizophrenia would be a thought disorder. Schizoaffective would be a mood and a thought disorder combined. They're super smart. So, like, I think some of the reasons people think Kanye's faking is because he's not
smart,
and he's not. I think people have an idea of what mental illness looks like. Like it's not functioning. Like you have to be walking down the street.
right?
You're on a cloud. No. You can function until you don't. Oftentimes, you try to surround yourself with people who you can make think you're doing better than you are. Like you're cognizant enough to do a lot of that sometimes.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I mean, my ex always said that my son was faking it and he wasn't really, it was just to get what he wanted. And till the day he passed, he was like, oh shit. It was real.
Did he think he was faking it up until the end?
Yeah, he really, up until the end, he really, it was the culture. It's like he never accepted mental illness. He was bipolar himself. And although he did take his meds for the most part until the end of his life, he still really didn't accept it.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that's just because of stigma? Do you think it's because he felt like that would mean something was wrong with him?
I think a lot of it is not just stigma, but the culture is so unaccepting. It's kind of the same with my mom was very unaccepting of my son's diagnosis because she felt the same way. Like he just needed to get a job and, everything would be good if he got a job.
Yeah, my mom was like, I told them about hanging around those friends. I was like, oh my God. And then when you're dealing with that and the very difficult reality of dealing with, the person one-on-one, those two things and not being supported is a difficult place to be, which is why things like NAMI are so great. But you were sharing about your son, because I was saying that like one of my big things about mental illness, especially in California, is that we need to do things to the system to kind of help people from falling through the cracks. And that your story was so heartbreaking to me because, you were able to do a lot of those things. You were able to get him conserved. Conserved just means when they go off their medicine and they're not doing well, you can call someone and have them taken.
Have them institutionalized.
Right. Whether they want to or
it's
not.
It's still difficult, even though you have conservatorship, it's still difficult. You still have to convince the police to take them in.
Oh, really?
Because they don't care that you have conservatorship. They have to feel that it's warranted.
I did not know that. So if you have conservatorship over your loved one who has a severe and persistent mental illness, so the process is what if they are acting out or off their meds, you call the police. Is that the first thing?
Yeah, and the police will come with the PET team if they hear. The PET team, it's the psychiatric evaluation team. And if they feel that you are accurate, that he does need to be stabilized, then they'll take him in. But if they don't feel that way, and again, like the person has to be at risk, they have to be their lives have to be in danger or someone else.
So they have to meet the same qualification as 5150? Are you kidding me?
No.
I did not know.
I know.
So 5150 is a 72-hour hold against your will, which is what happened to Kanye before, and what he's saying is that his wife is trying to do to him now. What I told Maya is that once I started to be really honest about my experiences with dealing with this, pretty much like 99% of the people I told had a similar story. Of either them having a mental health issue or episode, or a very close family member, brother, child, uncle, very close, mother. So I have a friend whose brother, I think he's probably schizoaffective, and he's in another state, and his parents have a conservatorship, and anytime he gets off his medicine, they can call him like he's off his medicine, and they will at least take him in to evaluate him.
What state is that?
Ohio.
Oh, yeah. Not in California.
California's laws
We're the worst.
are insane.
Yeah.
And it's no wonder we have so many homeless, so many young people. The suicide stats for young people in the last 10 years in the Black community have risen to 70%, I think, over the last decade, which is staggering.
Wow.
70%. That's staggering. I just don't understand why no one in California, I have seen some things, but they always get stalled. I don't, like you were saying, it seems to be a blind spot. So Maya volunteers, you want to tell people about the volunteering and how, you volunteer with the homeless and they think the solution to being homeless is just to build apartments, like that's going to help people.
Yeah. I mean, it's just crazy that we're coming up, we got like $750 million for mental illness and housing.
Was that through proposition?
Which was never spent.
Is that proposition that we had? Was it Proposition M or H or something?
Yeah, I don't remember what it was. All I know is they never spent the money, and I guess it's very complicated, but they just, at the meetings, the housing committee meetings, they spend so much time on figuring out how to build new facilities for these people. And I try to tell them you could build all the facilities you want. The key is, how do we get them in there?
And how do you get them to stay?
Stay once you get them in there.
Yeah. My friend told me about one of my friends who she did the podcast, and she lost her brother. And she didn't even know where he was at the time, but he was actually super close in Long Beach. And she said she found a great facility there.
That's where my son passed
I know. I just thought about that when I said that's where her son, unfortunately, the negligence.
What if it was the same facility?
Well, you know what? It wasn't. I think it was a program, so that it wasn't a facility. It was some program that sort of allowed them some freedom. I don't think they were as strict, even on you can't drink anything, you can't so. It wasn't so rigid.
The facility?
Understandable. Well, even the what do you call them? Where you have the group homes, sort of facilities. A step down when you come out of the
group home, the step down homes. I just find that a lot of the facilities don't have enough oversight and enough care.
I remember your case. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your case? And I remember there was even it was so opaque, even trying to find out what happened.
I had to fight the governor who withheld, we have the Freedom of Information Act where you're able to find out the amount of deaths, violations, et cetera, at these facilities. And the truth is, no, the Freedom of Information Act is only for, it doesn't apply to us civilians. The government is exempt. If they're hiding something, they can hide it all day long and you can't have access to it.
Who's it for? Just the journalists? Is that who's the Freedom of Information?
Well, I guess journalists can have access to it. Like I had the LA Times investigate the facility my son was in because I couldn't get a lot of information. And so the LA Times...
Just to back up for anybody who doesn't know. So your son, you were able to get him some help and get him in a facility. He had been on Skid Row and he was placed in a lockdown facility. Mm-hmm. So you were able to get him off the street, and then you got him into this lockdown facility, which everybody feels like, oh, great, now they're going to get help that they need.
Safe. But these facilities are usually they usually have a lot of violations. They're they're not the safest place to be. And we didn't know that, because these records are not public record. Like, you can't just go online and search and see, oh, this facility has 20 deaths in the last year and has 160 violations.
And why is that? Why is that?
Because the government can hide whatever they want from you. And a lot of these facilities are partially government funded. So they don't have to release anything if they don't want the public to know.
And when you say lockdown, do you mean like the mental health part of the hospital, or are these separate entities from a hospital?
No, this is a lockdown hospital where you cannot leave.
Okay. Because some of them have a floor where you can't leave. So it's a technical, these are hospitals.
This was one with the gates and surveillance and And luckily it was through surveillance that we found that they were not watching my son. And
so you got your son there. He was not doing well. You got him in the facility and I think you shared that you'd went and got him out once because he was asking to come back, and then
right. Yeah. I always got my son out. I was always like a sucker for that. Like, that was my little baby. Like, once he would start crying, like, Mommy, I would go get him, and Kristoff would go nuts because he thought I was, the helicopter parent, the one that always never let my son kind of suffer consequences. Mm-hmm. So that's what happened when he was in this last hospital. I went and got him out, and then Kristoff went crazy. And so I put him back in, and then he took his life. And it was something Kristoff was never able to live with. But I tried to tell him, like, it was like, we were damned if we did and damned if we didn't. Like, there was no winning,
right?
And
it's just trying your best.
Yeah.
Just what you think is right.
Yeah. And we didn't have the answers, and no one had the answers. It was, the worst. I still can't believe it happened. And if I really believed that it did happen, like, every day I believe that my son's coming back. If I believed that he wasn't coming back, I would be gone already. I would have left this planet. But I believe one day that this will all be a dream and I will see my son again.
Yeah, no, I can only imagine. And, I'm sure I can't imagine to the degree. And it's so hard on Kristoff, you said, which is completely understandable. And I remember seeing him, during different interviews during when you guys were, fighting with the Department of Mental Health and just so broken. So, I mean, like any of us would be certainly to endure something like that. But I do think that's it. You have to just know that when I first got into this world through my loved one, I instinctively went on a research binge. I'm going to figure this out. I will figure out where to go and what project what study to get involved in, and we are going to fix this. That was very much and we did. We went to UCLA and we got in a study, and we did rehab, and things did get better. And but everybody always looks at me like, you don't understand. Like, this is a marathon. This is not a sprint.
Right.
And there are no answers, which I was sure I was going to find at the beginning.
Right.
And, it takes a minute to understand, like, you just have to do your best.
Right. That's all you can do.
Yeah. And if you've done your best, and then you shared on your show that after all of this, quite understandably, you had such a difficult time.
Yeah. And then after, it was compounded by, the loss of my son, and then Kristoff. And then I had lost it. Like, I could not bear it anymore. And then my boyfriend had to 50 me twice.
Every day.
So I know what that is like. And, but now, looking back in retrospect, like, it was the best thing he could have done. It was the only thing he could have done.
Mm-hmm. And we were talking, because we were, talking about Kanye earlier and how, my experience with having a 5150 someone, the first time you guys are probably going to be good, because like everybody's figuring out what happens, but subsequent, it can really erode the trust, because the person feels like you're trying to lock them up, which is the language you so hear right now from
right.
Kanye, and you said you can relate to that because you were feeling that way in the throes of your mental health sort of crisis. You had that similar.
Oh yeah. I stole my phone and I was in the closet, like tweeting, like, help, get me out of here. I'm being held against my will. There's nothing wrong with me. I was just, oh my God, I'm so like embarrassed too. Like whenever like I think about that, I tweeted that out. I was like, oh my God. Like, it was like I was being held hostage, which is what I said. I think I'm being held hostage.
But it's so good to hear too. Go on.
You're so like out of your mind. You're not thinking sanely at the time.
Were there people when you tweeted that wanted to help you, that kind of were enabling that?
Oh my God. Everybody on Twitter was so supportive, calling my attorney, because a lot of people know who my attorney is, calling my attorney and help her get out, and she's being held against her will.
I think this is so important, Mia. Like, people who think they are helping when they have no clue what's happening. And it is a hard thing, because if it is your friend and you feel like they're being held against you, well, how can you not help them? But like, what if they had gotten you out? Like, what if somehow it worked and you weren't well?
Well, yeah, and I have to remember that that's a lot of times what happened with my son.
Yes,
he was telling everybody, oh my gosh, my mom's crazy, and people look at me like, why are you doing that to yourself?
Yes, oh my, and we were talking about like just the mom shaming or the spouse shaming, like with the Kardashians, or the child shaming, just depending on who in your life has the illness. It's so real. It's so, like, I totally know what you mean. It's like, well,
sounds so sane.
Yes, I know.
Like, like you can
present so well.
We can present ourselves, in a sane manner when we need to.
Yes, that is so. In NAMI, you hear all these stories, right? Everybody tells their story, which is why NAMI is so great. And so often, terribly in California, what a lot of people have to do, especially if they don't have the greatest insurance and a doctor won't recommend their loved one for conservatorship, is they will really say you have to get them arrested. Like, that's a real thing. It is mind-blowing that the key to getting a loved one help is involving the police in a way that could be dangerous.
Right. Which the police should not be involved with.
And the loved ones should not be plotting the arrest, you know what I'm saying, of their loved one, because they have nowhere else to turn. But the funny thing that would happen over and over, not the funny thing, it's not funny, but the interesting thing that would happen over and over is when the police would come, oftentimes the person who was acting so out of it would pull it together for like that brief period of time that the police come, and they don't take which is incredible. And it's hard to even put those two together, because you're like, well, how are both of these things true? How are they able to pull themselves together? You know what I'm saying? If they're really in crisis.
Right. Well, yeah, it's difficult. I know my son was able to do that. And I mean, at times, there were times when he wasn't.
Yeah.
And I guess it depends on how ill you are at the moment.
Right. Yeah. It's such a challenge, It's all a challenge, but I do think that part of your story was so interesting, just that you've experienced being there and not wanting to be there, or feeling like you were being held captive. And then, I'm sure your boyfriend probably got so much flack too.
Yes.
Locking you up.
For my family, he got a lot of support.
Of course, yes, because they understand.
Yeah. it was me that he's suffered.
Your friends, I'm sure, the ones who wanted to have your back and really, which is completely understandable, but part of what makes this so complex.
Yeah.
So how are you doing now? How are you doing with COVID and everything that's happening now?
So I'm getting by. It's been so difficult because now we got shut down again and my gym is closed and we have no 12-step meetings. So it's difficult.
Are your 12 steps meeting? Because that is a thing I think people don't think about, people who are in different support groups that now can't meet.
Yeah.
And that support. Do you guys do Zoom or are you still?
There's Zoom, but
it's not.
It's just so it's impersonal. We don't have the fellowship. So it's really hard, but we're going to get through this. And I just think it's so crazy that this is even happening, that we've shut down this much as we have, which I think is crazy. I'm not in agreement with the shutdown at all.
Mm-hmm. So. I think it's just so hard, there's so much chaos, added stress. So I do think we're going to get through it. I think these are great things to think about. I think thinking about all of the consequences are good. And so then thinking about who in our lives might we need to be more supportive of and reaching out more to.
Right. I think when you get out of yourself and try to help someone else, it helps you,
Yes,
and that's
these podcasts have been great for that. I'm sure your radio show is great for that.
And just every time I work with the homeless and with my program, that's been halted as well because of COVID. But every time I work with them, I feel better myself. So it's almost like I help.
Tell us about
others.
Your program.
I help others to help me. Yeah, the program is at Step Up on 2nd in Santa Monica, even though we're nationwide. That's where headquarters is at. And it's a homeless place where we also provide mental health services. And my program was there for years until COVID. Mm-hmm. So we're kind of just on hold. But these people saved my life.
Oh, that's amazing.
They really do. And I still have contact with them every day.
Oh, that's great.
So even though I don't have my program there anymore, we're still in contact.
Is that just because of COVID? Will you go back?
COVID, yeah. And yes, I will definitely go back.
Awesome. Well, we'll put a link in to the organization below too. And is there anything else you want to tell us about that you have happening? Or
yes, I just got a publishing deal for my book.
Awesome.
And it's called Fighting for My Life. And it's going to be out in 2021.
That's excellent.
And I'm excited about that. And people thought it's like a tell-all with Kristoff. And no, it's actually not. It's my memoirs about my life. Mm-hmm. And yes, Kristoff was a part of my life, but it's not my entire life. That's my dog part. But anyway, you can find more information about my organization or myself, MiaSt.JohnFoundation.org.
MiaSt.JohnFoundation.org. No, that's great. And I mean, even the bit you've shared here, I think is so valuable. And you've had so many different experiences and you see things from so many different, from the being a caregiver of a person with mental illness and a wife, and then having your own. I mean, it's an amazing a body of experience that you have to offer, and I can't wait for it. So definitely keep us posted. Thank you so much for sharing your time with me. It was so great talking to you earlier on your show. Yeah, and let's not let this be the last time.
All right, for sure.
Okay, take care. Bye.